All right, so everyone, let's be real for a sec, okay? That feeling. Staring at a blank page, knowing you have to write an argumentative essay. We've all been there, am I right?
Oh, yeah.
But what if I told you those essays, they weren't just some, like, academic torture device?
Right.
Today we're taking all those sources you guys sent in about, the art of the argumentative essay, and I've got an expert here.
Oh,
Help us
certainly.
unpack some, like, genuinely fascinating stuff that you can actually use in your daily life, not just for school.
It's true.
Right.
Like the core principles, right? You build a solid position, you think about like the other side, the counterpoints, and then like you craft, a killer rebuttal.
Yeah.
That's just everywhere, once you start noticing it.
It is. So our sources, they lay out like these three big elements pretty clearly. You got your position thesis, you got your counter argument, and then of course the rebuttal. Sounds very textbooky, but I'm betting we can find some real world aha moments.
Oh, absolutely. Let's take something super simple, like deciding where to eat with friends.
Oh, yeah.
It was like tacos.
Yeah.
You're passionately advocating for tacos.
Passionate.
That's your position thesis, right?
Yes.
But then your friend, they're like, no, I'm craving sushi. That's a counter argument.
And suddenly we're like, oh, but there's this new taco place downtown. It's amazing, and we can do sushi next time. You're crafting a rebuttal. We do this all the time.
All the time. We don't even realize it, right?
Exactly. And being aware of it can make us so much better at, like, communicating, not just in writing, but, like, in our everyday conversations.
100%.
So let's dig into that first piece, the position thesis.
Okay.
Our sources are pretty clear on this one. It needs to be clear. It needs to be specific. And most importantly, it needs to be arguable, right?
Yes.
It's like the foundation of your entire argument.
Right. And the sources use the example. The government should implement stricter gun control laws to reduce gun violence and enhance public safety. That's debatable. There's evidence on both sides, and it's definitely specific.
It's like the headline that sets the stage for the whole show, right?
Great.
It can't just be any debatable topic. It's got to be something you genuinely believe in and can back up, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, think of it this way. You wouldn't choose a thesis that you couldn't passionately defend in front of, like a tough crowd.
Ooh, good point. It's like picking a debate topic where you like actually have ammo.
Right.
So what if we try brainstorming a few just to see how this works?
Yeah.
How about remote work has significantly improved employee well-being?
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Very topical.
Yeah.
It's definitely debatable.
Yeah.
There's a ton of research you could do on that.
Tons.
What about, like, social media has a detrimental impact on teenagers' mental health? Again, lots of evidence and counter arguments there.
I like how just thinking about those like potential thesis statements already sparks a little bit of a debate in my head. Right. And this is before we even get to like the research.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You want that spark, that intrigue.
Yeah.
That's what your thesis should ignite in the audience.
Yeah.
That's what drives the whole argument.
Right. So we've got our like fiery thesis statement. We're feeling good. But now the sources throw us a curveball.
Okay.
The counter argument.
Yeah.
Why would I want to bring up the other side's points when I'm trying to convince them I'm right?
I know, right?
It seems counterintuitive.
It seems totally backwards.
Yeah.
But it's about building credibility, fostering this like more nuanced, more engaging discussion, acknowledging those opposing viewpoints. It actually strengthens your argument.
So it's not about backing down or anything.
Okay.
It's about showing that you've like done your homework.
100%.
You're not just like doing this one-sided rant.
No.
You're acknowledging that the issue is complex.
Exactly. And going back to that gun control example, our source actually gives us a counter argument. They say some people argue that stricter gun control laws, they infringe on individual rights to bear arms, right? And that they might not actually prevent criminals from getting guns.
Yeah. And that's a valid point that a lot of people would raise,
For sure.
So you're not ignoring it.
You're addressing it head on.
Right. You're saying, hey, I hear you, but let me explain why I still believe that, this is a stronger position.
You got it. It shows you're not afraid to engage with the other side and that you've actually thought critically about the issue.
Yeah.
And that's where the rebuttal comes in. Your chance to address those concerns and reinforce your initial thesis.
Ooh, it's like a verbal judo move. You're using their own momentum against them.
Exactly.
Now, our sources, they mention several different approaches to actually crafting that rebuttal.
Right.
Right? You can use evidence, logic, even alternative perspectives to, like, kind of dismantle that counter-argument. Right. And that's what makes it so compelling to read. Think about it. A good rebuttal isn't just about shutting down the opposition. It's about turning their own points into stepping stones that lead right back to your argument.
Oh, I like that. Stepping stones.
Right.
But how do we actually put all of this into an essay without it feeling like a jumbled mess?
Mm.
Our source mentions, like, different methods, right? There's this integrated approach.
Yeah, that's where you weave those counter-arguments and rebuttals throughout the entire essay. Then there's the separate paragraph method, which I think, especially with complex topics, it can provide a clearer presentation.
Yeah.
And then if you want something a little more dynamic, there's the alternating approach, where you present your claims and then respond to opposing views in like a more back and forth style.
Okay, so it's like choosing the right dance move for
Yeah.
the music.
Yes.
It depends on the argument, your style, and like how you want the whole piece to flow.
Yeah.
This is getting interesting.
I know, right?
It is. And remember, the goal is to create this like cohesive, persuasive piece that guides the reader through your reasoning.
So it's not just about throwing facts around, it's about telling a story with your argument.
Yes.
And speaking of storytelling, I noticed our sources give us like some helpful sentence starters for like these counter-argument and rebuttal sections. Is this like a cheat code to make my writing sound smarter?
Think of it like a toolbox,
Oh, okay.
not a cheat code.
Okay.
These sentence starters, they can be super useful, especially if you're like struggling to find the right words to transition between ideas smoothly.
Yeah. Like instead of just blurting out, but you're wrong, you could say something like, while that point is valid, it's important to consider.
Yes.
See, I feel smarter already.
I know. And don't underestimate the power of those transition words, however, nevertheless, on the other hand.
Yeah.
They're like those little arrows on like a hiking trail,
Yes.
making sure your reader doesn't get lost.
So we're building this whole argumentative journey complete with signposts and scenic overlooks and stuff.
Exactly.
I love it. I'm curious, though, can we see this in action? Does the source actually give us a like real-world example of how all this stuff comes together?
It does, and it's a super timely one. The source actually uses an argument about the potential harms of artificial intelligence
Yeah.
to illustrate, how to put all of these pieces together.
Ooh, AI. That's hot right now.
Right.
Let's dive in. Let's see how they handled this one.
The sample argument, it starts strong, okay? It lays out the position thesis right away.
Okay.
Artificial intelligence, it will harm society. It's a bold claim, right?
Okay.
It kind of grabs your
Yeah,
attention.
it's definitely a headline that makes you want to read on. So how do they handle the counter-argument? Because AI has like tons of supporters these days.
So they start by actually acknowledging those like potential benefits, right?
Okay.
Like AI assisting people with disabilities, providing companionship, even
Yeah.
like automating all those like tedious tasks that nobody wants to do.
Mm-hmm.
Right. They even concede that like AI can solve problems that humans might struggle with. It's smart, right?
Yeah.
They're building trust by acknowledging those points.
It's like saying, look, I get why people are excited about AI, but let's not forget about the potential downsides too, right?
Right, exactly.
So how does the rebuttal come in? Do they just say like, but AI is bad?
Not at all. They present these like specific arguments,
Yeah.
right? Suggesting that AI could lead to job losses, that it could like develop its own consciousness and see humans as inefficient or a threat. They even talk about how it could like exacerbate existing biases in society.
Oh, wow.
It's not just like dismissing the other side. It's about presenting a more complete picture.
Okay, so they're acknowledging the benefits, they're addressing the potential concerns. Now it's time for the big question.
The so what?
Yeah, the so what?
Right.
Why should we even care about any of this? The source dives into that too, right?
Absolutely. They highlight the potential, for example, for AI to replace human jobs, to disrupt healthcare. They even say it could pose a threat to like civilization itself if it's not carefully controlled.
Wow.
It's a wake-up call. These aren't just abstract arguments, right? This has real-world consequences.
It makes those like late night debates about robots taking over the world feel a little less far-fetched.
Right.
It's like this whole argumentative essay structure. It's not just for school papers.
Yeah.
It's like a framework for understanding the world around us.
Exactly. And the AI example is just one illustration, right?
Yeah.
This approach can be applied to so many topics,
Yeah.
even those that are like super sensitive and emotionally charged.
Oh, yeah. It even tackles the debate over abortion to show how these techniques can be used effectively.
Yes.
Even with like really complex issues.
Exactly. It's a great example, right? They show you how to present a really strong stance
Yeah.
while still engaging respectfully with the opposing viewpoints.
Right. So the source, it lays out the position thesis. In this case, it was for abortion.
Okay.
Then they present the counterargument, so against abortion.
Right.
And then it moves into the rebuttal. So they argue but for abortion. And then they provide like all these reasons and evidence to back up their stance.
Exactly. And it demonstrates, that you can have a really strong opinion without resorting to personal attacks or just dismissing the other side completely.
Right.
And that's so important.
It's about understanding.
It is.
Yeah.
And the beauty of this approach is that it really encourages deeper thinking.
Yeah.
And it leads to like more nuanced conversations, even on issues where people tend to have these strong opposing views. It's about finding that common ground, fostering understanding, even when you disagree.
Okay. This is making me rethink like how I approach those heated debates with my family at Thanksgiving dinner.
Oh, I know, right?
Maybe I should like bring some note cards with sentence starters. And speaking of sentence starters, like our source gives us a whole bunch, right? Having those like right phrases in my back pocket, like game changer.
Think of them as tools to help you navigate all those tricky transitions, to make your arguments smoother, more persuasive.
Yeah.
So, for example, right, when you introduce that counter argument, some people might argue that, or it's commonly believed that.
Yeah. And then when you're ready to just drop that, like mic drop rebuttal, you can be like, however, it's crucial to consider.
Yeah.
Or, despite those claims, it's clear that.
You got it.
I love it.
It's about finding that language that best fits your argument and using it to, like, guide your reader or your listener through your line of reasoning.
Yes.
And the source even mentions that you can just Google, like, transition words if you're feeling stuck.
Oh, yeah.
It's so simple, but it's so effective. It's a way to, like, expand your vocabulary and find new ways to express those transitions.
It's like a secret weapon.
Right.
It makes my writing sound super sharp and sophisticated.
Right.
Okay. But what about those times when you actually kind of agree with the counter argument?
Yeah.
Like, is it okay to acknowledge that, or does that, like, weaken your whole position?
Oh, it's totally okay, and it can actually strengthen your argument.
Really?
The source talks about this concession and rebuttal technique,
Okay.
where you acknowledge a valid point from the other side, but then you ultimately reinforce your own stance. It shows that you're not just, like, blindly arguing, but that you're genuinely considering all sides.
So it's like saying, okay, yeah, you've got a point there, but here's why I still believe that my position is stronger. It's like, it's about finding that balance.
It is. It's about acknowledging the other perspective, but then standing firm in your own beliefs.
Yeah.
And the source actually gives us a really clear example. They say, it is believed by many that AI is beneficial to society. However, this author disagrees and believes that AI is harmful to society. It's direct. It acknowledges the opposing view, and then, bam, it sets up that rebuttal perfectly.
It's a powerful way to approach it.
It is.
Yeah.
And the source gives you sentence starters for this type of rebuttal, too. Things like, that point may be true, but it's unimportant because. Or, while that may be the case, my thesis is still true because. It's like a blueprint.
It's a blueprint for crafting a nuanced rebuttal, right?
Yes.
That takes into account the complexity of the issue. Okay, this is making me realize that crafting a solid argument, it's kind of like building a house.
It is.
You need that strong foundation, which is your thesis, right?
Right.
You need to consider all sides, which is like looking at all the blueprints, the counter arguments.
Yes.
And then you got to reinforce the structure with those rebuttals. But what about the overall design? How do we like choose the best way to organize all these elements?
So that's where choosing the right structure comes in. The source mentions like 3 main approaches. There's that integrated method where you weave the counter arguments and rebuttals throughout. Then there's the separate paragraph method, which gives you a clearer separation of those ideas. And then there's the alternating approach, which creates that like back and forth, more dynamic flow.
So it's like choosing the layout for your house.
Exactly.
Like, do you want an open floor plan where everything kind of flows together? Or do you want separate rooms with like really distinct purposes?
You got it.
It depends on your style, right? And the overall feel you're going for.
And the source even gives you examples of how each of these structures might look, like in practice. So with that integrated approach, right, you might start a paragraph by presenting some evidence for your claim.
Okay.
And then you smoothly introduce that counterargument, and then, boom, immediately follow it with your rebuttal.
So it's like you're having a conversation with the reader, right? Anticipating their objections and addressing them right then and there. It keeps things moving.
It does, and it keeps it from feeling too one-sided, right?
Yeah, exactly. Now, contrast that with the separate paragraph method.
Okay.
Here, you dedicate like distinct paragraphs to each element. So you have one for your main point,
Yes.
one for the counterargument, and then one for your rebuttal.
It's like creating those clear boundaries,
Yeah, it is.
making sure each piece of the argument has its own space to breathe. And that can be really helpful for complex topics where you need like more room to unpack all the different layers of the argument.
It's like giving each idea its own room in the house.
Exactly. And then there's the alternating approach, which is all about creating that back and forth rhythm.
Okay.
So you present a point, address a counter argument, present another point, address another counter argument. It keeps going like that.
Oh, it's like a verbal tennis match. Keeps the reader engaged.
It does. And the best part is there's no one right way to structure it.
I was just thinking that.
It depends on your topic. It depends on your style and what feels most effective for you.
So it's not about following a rigid formula. It's about finding what works best for your particular argumentative journey, right? This is making me want to like dust off some of my old essays and see if I can spice them up with some of these techniques.
I know, right?
Speaking of spicing things up, did the source provide any other like fun tips or tricks to make arguments stand out?
They did. And this one's a real gem.
Okay, let's hear it.
They encourage writers to move beyond like vague statements, like research shows
Yeah.
or experts say.
Yeah.
And instead, they want you to provide specific citations and examples.
Oh, okay.
It's about showing your work, right?
Yeah.
Demonstrating that you've done your research, that your claims are backed up by solid evidence.
It's like the difference between saying, I heard this great song, and actually playing the song for someone.
Exactly. Show, don't tell. And the more specific you can be, the better. So instead of saying, studies show that AI can be harmful, right?
Yeah.
You actually cite a specific study. You mention its findings, and you explain how that supports your point.
It's like taking your argument from a black and white sketch to a full-color, high-definition masterpiece. And the best part is, we have all these amazing resources at our fingertips.
Right.
Like, with a quick Google search, we can find studies, statistics, expert opinions, all sorts of things to add depth and credibility to our arguments.
Absolutely. And while you're Googling, why not explore like different ways to say but?
Oh, yeah, but.
We use it all the time. But there are so many more nuanced and expressive alternatives out there. Instead of relying on that trusty but, experiment with phrases like however, nevertheless, on the other hand.
Yeah. It's like adding a dash of flavor to your writing, right?
It is.
Makes it more engaging for the reader. And it shows that you're not just relying on those like same old tired phrases.
Right.
You're putting thought and effort into crafting your arguments.
It's all about finding your voice.
Yes.
Right? Using language to its full potential.
Yes.
And don't forget about those transition words we talked about earlier.
No, yes. Those are important.
They're like the glue that holds your whole argument together.
Yeah.
Making sure each piece flows smoothly into the next.
Yeah, it's like building a bridge between your ideas.
Right.
Making sure your reader doesn't fall into some gap in your reasoning. Okay, I'm feeling so much more confident about my argumentative skills now. But
Yeah.
I have to ask, can we see all of this come together in a real-world example?
Yes.
Does the source actually give us a like sample argument that we can dissect and learn from?
They do. And they chose a topic that's been generating a lot of buzz lately. It's the potential harms of artificial intelligence.
Oh, AI. That's hot right now.
It is.
Let's dive in and see how they handle this one.
Okay, so the AI argument, it laid out that position thesis right away. Artificial intelligence will harm society.
Straight to the point.
Bold statement. Gets you thinking.
Definitely makes you want to hear more. So how do they address the counter-argument? Because AI has a ton of supporters.
Right. So they start by acknowledging those potential benefits, right?
Yeah.
AI assisting people with disabilities, providing companionship, automating tasks.
Right. Makes sense.
They'd even say, like, hey, AI can solve problems that humans struggle with.
Okay, yeah.
So they build credibility before they present the rebuttal.
It's like they're saying, yeah, I get it. There are good things, but...
Okay, exactly.
Okay, so what's the rebuttal? How do they counter?
So they argue that AI could lead to job displacement, potentially even, like, develop its own consciousness.
Whoa.
And see humans as a threat, right?
Yeah.
Or as inefficient. They even bring up the whole bias thing.
Oh, yeah.
That it could exacerbate existing biases in society.
Right.
And they talk about privacy risks.
Okay, yeah, that's a whole other can of worms.
It is.
So that's pretty serious stuff.
Right.
Makes you think about those sci-fi movies where robots take over the world. But it doesn't stop there, right? They also talk about, like, the so what.
Exactly. They explore the real-world implications.
Right, like, why should we care?
Exactly. So they highlight the potential for AI to replace jobs, to disrupt healthcare. They even say, like, hey, this could be a threat to civilization.
If it's not controlled.
Right, if it's not controlled, exactly.
Okay, so this is
Yeah.
real stuff. This isn't just a theoretical debate.
Right, it has real consequences.
So we're seeing that argumentative essay structure in action. And it's not just for essays, right?
Yeah.
It's a way to understand these big issues and have these really cool discussions. What's really interesting to me is how they use that same structure for super sensitive topics.
Oh, yeah, the abortion debate. That's a great example.
Right, like how do you even approach that?
They show how you can still be effective.
Yeah.
Even with an issue like that, you can still have a strong argument, acknowledge the other side.
And still have a civil conversation.
Right, exactly.
It's like you're saying, okay, we can disagree, but we can still be respectful.
You got it. You can have different opinions,
Yeah.
but it's about, like, approaching those conversations with clarity and respect.
Yeah, being open to different perspectives.
Exactly.
This is making me rethink how I talk to my family about, like, everything.
I know, right?
Maybe I should carry around some note cards with those sentence starters.
That's a good idea.
The source gave us a whole bunch, right?
Yeah, they did.
Like, instead of saying, but you're wrong, you can say, well, that's a good point. It's also important to consider.
Perfect.
Exactly.
Right. It just sounds so much better.
And you can always Google more transition words if you get stuck.
That's true. It's like having a cheat sheet.
It is.
But what about those times when you actually agree with part of the counterargument?
Oh, yeah, that happens.
Like, is it okay to say that out loud? Or does it, like, weaken your position?
No, not at all. It can actually make your argument stronger.
What? Really?
The source calls it concession and rebuttal.
Okay.
You acknowledge the other side, but then you come back and reinforce your own stance.
So you're like, yeah, you got a point, but.
Right, exactly.
And then you hit him with the but.
Yeah. But here's why I still think my position is stronger.
Oh, okay.
I like it.
It shows you're thinking about it.
Yeah. You're not just blindly arguing. You've actually considered both sides. And the source even gives you sentence starters for this. Things like, that may be true, but it's not important because, or, while that may be the case, my thesis is still true because.
It's like a blueprint for a really smart rebuttal.
It is.
Man, this whole thing about crafting a strong argument, it's really an art.
It is. It's like building a house, right?
Yeah.
You need that strong foundation.
Yeah, your thesis.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You got to look at all the blueprints, consider all sides, and then you reinforce it.
Yeah.
And then you got to decide what kind of house you're building.
And this is like not just about writing essays. This
Yeah.
is about how we communicate in the world.
It's about thinking critically,
Hmm.
considering different perspectives, and then expressing yourself.
Exactly. And the cool thing is, anyone can do this.
Oh, yeah.
Like with a little practice and some tips from, these sources, we can all get better at communicating.
And be better thinkers. It makes these deep dives so fun. It's not just about learning the mechanics of writing an essay. It's about developing skills that help us engage with the world.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with this thought. Don't be afraid to argue. Use it to explore your own ideas, to challenge those assumptions, and to have those conversations that make life interesting.
And remember, it's not about winning or losing an argument. It's about learning, growing, and connecting with people through ideas.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on this deep dive. Share your aha moments with us. Keep the conversation going. Until next time, happy arguing.